The U.S. middle class is under a lot of pressure, with the cost of living soaring to absurd levels. Even those who used to have comfortable lifestyles are now financially struggling. People didn't used to care much about finances in the past, but that's rapidly changing. Under normal circumstances, most hardworking Americans don't have the time or the energy to debate about the state of our economy, but since things started to go very, very wrong, everyone seems to be worried. Our leaders have really messed things up this time, and now the consequences of their reckless policies are piercing through every layer of our society, and everyone is feeling the pain. Right now, people desperately want economic conditions to return to normal, but that isn't going to be so easy. Trillions of printed dollars have been pumped into the financial system over the past 2 years, and that's something we just can't undo. Our politicians in Washington have been borrowing and spending like there's no tomorrow. Some of them probably thought that the day of reckoning would never arrive. But as analysts at Forbes aptly noted earlier this week, most of the U.S. population is now suffering as living expenses surge to levels never before seen. They wrote, Americans are now paying a heavy price for this magical thinking. Inflation, spurred at least in part by record government spending and inaction on other issues, is running at its highest rate since 1982. The prices for meat and eggs up 12.2% since last year. Furniture and bedding up 17%. Used cars and used trucks are up 40.5%. Meanwhile, the Treasury Department recently reported America's total national debt is now over $30 trillion. That is the highest ever. To put this in context, if you stacked $30 trillion of $100 bills, you could almost reach the weather satellites orbiting the Earth at over 20,000 miles above us. It's no secret anymore that Washington spends recklessly, the article highlighted. Now we're left with an unprecedented amount of money chasing a smaller pool of goods and services, since those printed dollars continue to flow into the economy, while global production continues to slow down, which worsens the imbalance between supply and demand and pushes prices up. As a result, the cost of living has been skyrocketing into the stratosphere, and that has been particularly detrimental to the American middle class, one of the main pillars of the U.S. economy. The middle class is responsible for the largest share of consumer spending, but ever since inflation has started to accelerate, people's buying power has been declining at an alarming pace. Consumer spending is going to continue to cool off as the price of necessities rises above what most people can afford. For example, a new study found that 82.2%, or 4 out of 5 new vehicle buyers, were forced to pay well above sticker price in January. The average price paid above sticker was $728. Just 2 years ago, shoppers would get an average discount of $2,648 when purchasing a new car. Meanwhile, the wealthy are paying a $4,048 premium to get to choose the models they want before anyone else. This is in part driven by affluent consumers being willing to shell out more cash to get the vehicles that they want, but there's also a vast population of individuals who are being forced to do so simply because they need transportation and have no other choice, explained Jessica Caldwell, Edmunds' Executive Director of Insights. Edmunds suggests consumers to hold off on a new car purchase if they can, but it also said that price relief is not expected to arrive anytime soon. On top of that, it's getting increasingly more expensive to fuel our vehicles. Just yesterday, the average price of a gallon of gasoline hit a new record high. In California, the new average price of a gallon of gas is It's $4.72. Experts say a whopping $5 a gallon will likely become the norm in a matter of months, if not sooner. The trend of higher gasoline prices is just the beginning. And this is not just an issue for West Coasters. Some of the factors behind the spike in prices, particularly those related to the shift to renewable fuels, are going to affect U.S. gas costs nationally in the next few months. Though the national average of $3.52 a gallon is far lower than California's $4.72, industry executives say that the national price is rising much faster on a percentage basis. Gas prices were up 6% nationwide in just the last month and have jumped 40% over the last year. In a recent interview, Energy Word founder Dan Dicker warned that drivers should brace for another surge in gas prices amid rising global tensions and years of underinvestment by the oil industry. He said, "My guess is that you're going to see $5 a gallon at any triple-digit oil prices as soon as you get to $100. And you might get to $6.50 or $7. Forget about $150 a gallon. I don't know where we'll be by then," he said. Patrick DeHaan, Gas Buddy head of petroleum analysis, noted that not only are oil prices up, but the bulk of the nation is starting the multi-month transition to summer gasoline, further adding to the rise at the pump. In addition, cold weather in Texas last week caused some power outages at major refineries, weighing even more on markets. I see no other potentials in the short term but additional price increases. We'll still see seasonality push prices up, so motorists should be ready to dig deeper, he said. Just imagine having to pay $7 for a gallon of gasoline. Something that would be considered extremely crazy just a couple of years ago is now closer to becoming part of our daily reality. Housing is also increasingly unaffordable. The average price of a newly built home is nearly $19,000 higher due to a massive increase in the price of lumber. If people aren't listening now, the dire predictions that we've been making appear to be coming true. Jerry Howard, CEO of National Association of Home Builders, said in a Wednesday interview. Jerry Howard pointed out that the lumber problem can be traced back to three main causes: supply chain disruptions, deregulation, and rampant inflation. He said it's a combination of the lack of supply, the supply chain crisis, the lack of transportation for them to get lumber from the sites to the builders. It's a problem with the lumber companies themselves not increasing their production. And it's a problem with our trade tensions with Canada on lumber, he noted. Increased building material costs were the main topic of concern at a recent builders conference, Howard added. To make things worse, heating our homes, which is a major necessity, of course, during the winter, is actually becoming a privilege reserved to those who can afford rising heating costs. A new analysis released by the Heartland Institute reported that the typical American family's home heating costs rose by as much as $1,000 as a result of the government's energy and environmental policies. Over the past year, the average U.S. household spent an extra $600 in higher gasoline costs and $700 in higher electricity costs. Further, households that use natural gas spent an extra $300 on average, and those using home heating oil paid $1,000 more. Cumulatively, the average American household paid about $1,000 in higher energy costs compared to a year ago. Heartland authors Lino Lucan and Jack Taylor wrote in the report. It's also important to note that these higher energy prices have been baked into the costs for all goods and services bought and sold in the economy, contributing to across-the-board inflation. With those costs in mind, it's clear the administration's disastrous energy and climate policies cost the average U.S. household, directly or indirectly, much more than $1,000 over the past year, Lucan and Taylor continued. It's safe to say that most Americans were not prepared for such a dramatic increase in the cost of living. Currently, over 70% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and even middle-class workers have been facing major difficulties to make ends meet. That's why more and more people are taking on credit card debt to pay for rising living expenses. In fact, according to the New York Fed, the total U.S. household debt hit $15.8 trillion in the fourth quarter of 2021, after an increase of $333 billion from the previous quarter. Credit card balances alone hit $860 billion, up $52 billion in that same time frame. That's the largest quarterly increase the Fed has seen in the 22 years it's been collecting data, the researchers say, adding that the surge in debt overall was driven by soaring home and car prices. The total increase in nominal debt during 2021 has been the largest we've seen since 2007. Wilbert van der Klaauw, senior vice president at the New York Fed, said in a statement, "The aggregate balances of newly opened mortgage and auto loans sharply increased in 2021, corresponding to increases in home and car prices. On the other hand, real wages are simply not keeping up with inflation. So, people have less cash to spend after they pay their usual bills. And as a result, they end up racking up credit card debt even more. This is systematically destroying the United States middle class, and that will have enormous consequences for our economy as a whole. The U.S. used to have the largest and most prosperous middle class that the world had ever seen. But now that the same middle class is being absolutely eviscerated, and the ones we call leaders have been responsible for that decay. With each passing day, more Americans are realizing what is truly going on, and they're becoming very angry. Most people had assumed that there would be endless prosperity for many decades to come, but now it's clear that our future is going to be extremely chaotic. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy our content, we strongly recommend 7-Year Apocalypse, the latest book from the economist and financial expert Michael Snyder. In the meantime, don't forget to leave this video a thumbs up, share it with friends, share it with family, and subscribe to our channel to always keep updated with our latest notifications.